That was still an extremely dishonest speech. I counted at least 13 flat false claims, and that is a preliminary count that doesn't include a whole bunch of additional misleading or uncorroborated claims. He, for example, repeated his false claim that foreign countries like China pay his tariffs, though Americans make those tariff payments. He wildly exaggerated figures on inflation and immigration under President Biden. He claimed to have terminated something called the Green New Scam, even though the Green New Deal congressional resolution was never actually passed, and Trump has not repealed the big environmental law that President Biden did pass. There's a lot more, as you said. You can read our full list on CNN.com. But now I want to go into detail on an important and eye-catching claim that was highly misleading. The president talked at length about millions of people being listed as alive in a Social Security database, even though they're obviously dead. Listen.
3.9 million people from ages 130 to 139. 3.5 million people from ages 140 to 149. And money is being paid to many of them because it just keeps getting paid and nobody does. And it really hurts Social Security and hurts our country. And one person is listed at 360 years of age, more than 100 years older than our country.
I've spoken to conservative experts about this claim, and they've noted, Jake, that the president is leaving out something absolutely critical to understanding this issue. Here's what he failed to explain. These numbers are not the numbers of dead people who are actually getting paid Social Security checks. Trump was referring to a legitimate problem with some deaths not being marked in the Social Security database, but that doesn't mean people listed as being 150, 200, 300 are actually getting money. And that's because Social Security already has a system in place to automatically cut off people who are listed as being 115 or older. Now, 2 years ago, an inspector general looked into this. She found there were about 19 million people 100 or older who were not marked as deceased. But critically, she also found that only 44,000 of these people were actually receiving payments. And one conservative expert told me even those 44K are likely legit payments, since at the time there were about 86,000 living Americans age 100 or older. Now let's listen to something the president said about the war in Ukraine.
Europe has sadly spent more money buying Russian oil and gas than they have spent on defending Ukraine, by far. Think of that. They've spent more buying Russian oil and gas than they have defending. And we've spent perhaps $350 billion, like taking candy from a baby. That's what happened. And they've spent $100 billion.
Those are fictional numbers, and this is a fictional narrative. President Trump keeps telling the story about how the U.S. has sent Ukraine way more than Europe has collectively. In fact, Europe has committed and provided more aid to Ukraine during this war than the U.S. has. So Trump said the U.S. has spent maybe $350 billion and Europe $100 billion. Well, a German think tank that closely tracks this issue found the U.S. has committed about $126 billion, actually allocated about $121 billion, so way less than $350 billion. He said Europe has spent $100 billion, while the think tank found Europe had committed $263 billion, so way more, actually allocated about $140 billion. Now, you can get different numbers with different counting methodologies, but nobody legitimate, even the U.S. government itself, has gotten anywhere close to that $350 billion figure that President Trump keeps using, Jake.